Our first speaker is Dr. Lorry Wagner. Dr. Wagner is the president of the Cleveland-based Lake Erie Energy Development Corporation, or LEEDCo, a position he assumed in May 2010. LEEDCo, an economic development corporation, is a private, nonprofit enterprise representing Northern Ohio's public interest in offshore wind. Founded in 2009 as a result of the work of the Great Lakes Energy Development Task Force, LEEDCo is leading Northern Ohio's regional efforts to build and install an initial offshore wind pilot project near Cleveland in Lake Erie, the first offshore freshwater wind energy project in North America. I was certainly very excited that we were able to have Dr. Wagner here today. Since joining Growth Partnership, I've had the opportunity to serve on the Economic Development Committee with LEEDCo, and I'm certainly getting more and more involved. And I've been able to fill that role at the request of the commissioners, who have certainly done a great job of positioning Ashtabula County and having Ashtabula County be a part of LEEDCo in these ongoing discussions. It's hopefully long-term Ashtabula's ports, manufacturers, and our offshore winds will allow the county to contribute to this endeavor in the future. So I will turn it over to Dr. Wagner.
Okay, thank you very much. Apologize for being a little slow this morning, so all I can say is this talk really better be good. But in any case, I'd like to thank Dan Claypool and Casey Kozlowski and anybody else who is here who has made this possible. There's been a lot of support from Ashtabula County as well as the other three counties, and Peg Carlo and Joe. There you are. Okay, Joe Morosky. So it really has been a collaborative process. I want to give you an overview today. Anybody has any questions, anything, just interrupt me. I certainly deserve that today. So to get started, I will present basically what our thinking is, how we got here, and what the opportunities are for growth in the region. And basically, this gives you an idea of what it's about. Those little things on the left side there, those little platforms only weigh about 600 metric tons. It's a little hard to tell from here. The other is just a offshore wind farm in the middle of the North Sea, and it's not a whole lot of days that looks like that on the North Sea. So I imagine it's yes. Okay. So really, this is the question that everybody asks us: why would we be doing something like this? And I'll tell you a little more about it. This is where we are. We're currently #1 in the Great Lakes for mercury deposition in our lake. We can't eat fish every day. Pregnant women have a little more difficulty. Maybe once or twice a month they can eat fish out of Lake Erie. In full disclosure, I started out as a nuclear engineer. I moved into industrial engineering and a lot of computer automation. Got into the wind industry in '05, so I present this slide because it really bothers me. I'm not a raging environmentalist, but this is just the facts. This is where we are. This is on July 31st this year. This is the Lakeshore Power Plant in Cleveland. So this is the way it is. I took this picture riding my bike. I was pretty shocked to see it, but this is reality. This is what we live with. We do have a great opportunity. Currently, you can see that we're primarily coal, a little bit of natural gas. Nuclear, which is still near and dear to my heart, is probably not going to get any bigger than that. It's going to take all of our industrial production in this country just to keep 20%. I wish that was different, but I don't see it happening. So here's the issue. We're going to retire at least 20% of our coal plants in the next 10 years. That's a lot of energy. What are we going to do? Certainly natural gas is going to fill some of that gap, but natural gas is not particularly suited for generating electricity. So the question is, how do we deal with that? What's interesting is that in the first quarter of 2011, renewables, all renewables, produced more energy in this country, more electric energy, than nuclear power. First time in this history of the country. So it gives you an idea that renewables at least have a place. How large that place is going to be determined by a lot of factors. This is downtown Cleveland. last April, I was walking to a meeting. I was pretty surprised. Our offices are downtown on Euclid Avenue, and I took this picture. My staff got really angry with me because they said I was cherry picking, and I just waited until, you know, that's what it would look like. So last July, I went to lunch, and now there's only one person left on the street. There were two. But, you know, we've lost 500,000 jobs. It's no secret to this community or any of the communities along the lake, and that's our issue. That's where we are. And here's the question. This isn't about the polar bears, but the question is this where we're going to be left? What are we actively doing to improve the economy and what's happening in our region? There's a lot of little initiative, the McCanthus and some of these other things that are going on are tremendous. But it's going to take everything we can do. And I think that's the message. It's not about shale gas, it's not about offshore wind, it's not about onshore wind. It's about everything we can do to use the skills in this region and build our economy. The reason we're interested in offshore wind is very simple. If you do the math on 2010, offshore wind is the big thing in Europe. 41,000 jobs have been generated just from offshore wind. That's a big number. What's more important is right now there's $137 billion in projects in Europe alone invested in offshore wind. $137 billion is more than probably all of us put together in this room have in our pocket. Or in our bank accounts. It's a lot of money. What really gets me is France. 80% nuclear, meet all their global warming protocols, everything you can think of. They have a tremendous nuclear industry. So why would they be interested in offshore wind? Why would they spend $14 billion? It's the jobs. The UK is doing it, Denmark's doing it, Holland is doing it, Norway, Sweden, everywhere in Europe is doing it. France doesn't want to miss out on the jobs. They don't want to see the jobs go everywhere else. And so they are investing $14 billion in offshore wind. Well, what's even more interesting, Blackstone, which is arguably the largest private equity firm in the United States, last year they did $35.6 billion in private equity investment. They just invested $3 billion in an offshore wind farm in Germany. So you ask yourself, scratch your head, private equity, this is all about business, this is all about making money. Why are they doing this? Simple. There's money to be made in offshore wind in Europe. This gives you an idea. It's a little bit hard to see. Is there a pointer on here? Well, that's all right. I think everybody can see, that's the UK over there. That's Scandinavia. This is Spain, France, and the rest of Europe. All those little spots in the water are offshore wind projects. So just from a visual perspective, you look at that and you go, wow, that's a lot of activity. That's not just, there's a little bit over here, there's a little bit over here. It's all over Europe. The UK is going to generate 30% of its energy by 2020 from offshore wind. That's a huge number. That's a lot of energy. So that gives you a sense of where Europe is going. Now, Asia is moving in a similar direction. Small companies like Hyundai, Daewoo, Toshiba, who's the other one? Samsung, all those small companies are moving into offshore wind. Why are they doing it? There's a business case. There's a business case in the UK, there's a business case in Europe, business case in Asia, business case in Brazil. These companies are moving in that direction because they can make money. Well, what are we going to do about this? First wind turbine, electric generating wind turbine, was invented in Ohio. Charles Brush had this on Euclid Avenue, powered his rather nice home. It's a little bit hard to see, but there's a person down here. So that gives you an idea of the scale of that wind turbine. Produced about 10 kilowatts, so quite a large structure for not a lot of power, but that was 1887. Fast forward to the 70s, NASA Glenn Research invented, at the time it was NASA Lewis, brought wind technology to its current state of the art. In fact, they developed a 3.2 megawatt wind turbine in the early 80s, which was the largest wind turbine in the world until 2005. Our technology, our region, our people, our intellectual power. When our energy policy disappeared, that technology went to Europe, primarily Denmark. But we've done it before, we can do it again, and that's the message from here. This is what got people thinking on our team in 2004, the idea of what are we going to do in this region to help it develop economically? What are our skills? And if you look at the manufacturing, the engineering, all of the different skills that we have as a people in Ohio, where can we go with that? So the Cleveland Foundation basically looked at that, went around the world and said, what is the next revolution that's going to come in this region? We missed the IT revolution. We more or less missed the biotech revolution. What is the next one? And that is energy, all forms of energy. And what suited our skills particularly well is offshore wind. A lot of different things happened. We were fortunate enough to have a crib off of Cleveland, 3.5 miles out, that became our research station. Measure the wind resource. What is the resource that's out there? Is it reasonable? Can it generate energy? The wind turbine at the Great Lakes Science Center, feasibility study. We brought on our industrial partners in 2010, GE, Freshwater Wind, and we started our environmental studies. We got our submerged land lease option for a region in the lake. And it was the last act in office by former Governor Strickland. And we are on our way toward moving the project forward, hoping to develop it by start construction in 2014. The goal here is to get enough of an industry built by 2020 such that we bring more manufacturing and jobs to the region. That's why we state our goal is 1,000 megawatts by 2020. That's on the order of 50 turbines a year. That would be a total of about 200 to 250 turbines in the water. And that's in line with, if you ask someone like MFG, what is it going to take to build a new facility for something like this? They say, well, we need to sell X number of blades a year, 250 blade sets, 100 blade sets. What is it going to take for that kind of investment? So the idea is to seed the industry with 1,000 megawatts and then grow the industry from there. As was announced in the introduction, LEEDCo is a public-private partnership made up of the 4 counties, Lake, Ashtabula, Cuyahoga, and Lorain, City of Cleveland, Nortec, and the Cleveland Foundation. So it's a true public-private partnership. Our goal is to get the industry moving and then bring in as much private investment as possible, something like the Blackstone Group or anybody else. The first project will take significant private equity, and that's what the freshwater team brings to the table. The total vision, when you look at, start to finish, what would we consider a job well done, and look back on what happened. And that's where we talk about the first is a pilot project. It says 2013, but that was certainly our target, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer. 2020 is to have 1,000 megawatts in the water, and 2030 is to have 5,000 in the water. What does that mean? That's approximately 10% of the potential of Lake Erie. So when you think about what's out there, what is the resource we're trying to develop. We're saying if we can develop 10% of what's available, we have done a significant job. We've brought economic development to the region, and we have jump-started an industry. The interesting thing about Ohio, as I said, is what are our skills? Currently, we are one of the leaders in the country in manufacturing and engineering and development of wind energy. The chart on the right shows about 500 companies comprising approximately 7,500 jobs in the onshore wind industry. Currently, Ohio really has no onshore wind farms. We have 4 turbines at Bowling Green, a few scattered around the state, and the first project is going in as we speak in the western part of the state. So without any onshore wind energy projects, how did we become one of the leaders in manufacturing? Well, to anybody here who's in the business or is in manufacturing, you know well the skills that we have as a region in terms of understanding there's an opportunity, here's what we can do. This is the industry that we will build on for the offshore industry. The picture there is a blow-up of the General Electric turbine that we plan to use in the first project. It's what's known as a direct drive machine. It eliminates the gearbox, the most common point of failure in wind turbines. It has about 4,000 parts compared to 8,000 parts in a gearbox-driven turbine. It's a 4.1 megawatt machine. To give you an idea of where this technology is going, there was an announcement last week that currently GE is working on a 10 to 15 megawatt turbine. So something on the order of 4 times larger than that. If you look at what it takes to build a project like this, one of the things that we've looked at is what does it take to do it? And the picture on the lower left gives you an idea of the foundations that we intend to use in this project. Right now, we don't have 100% of our geological information, but we're probably 90% sure we're going to be using what's called a gravity-based foundation. That's essentially 4,000 metric tons of concrete and rebar, and it's the world's largest paperweight. You build it on land, you float it out, you sink it, and then you fill it with approximately 4,000 to 5,000 more tons of aggregate and sand. Place it on the bottom. As you can see, each one of those is approximately a 10 to 12 story building. The ones we would use for our project would be approximately twice as large as those. These were built for a 2.3 megawatt machine. As you can see, it requires a lot of space in the ports. This picture over here is from the Ashtabula Port's website, but it is a tremendous asset. Approximately 300 or so acres is my understanding. A wind farm that can put out, a port facility that would be considered an industrial production offshore wind staging area takes approximately 100 acres. So that gives you an idea of what it would take. A port like that could put out approximately 100 wind turbines a year. So in trying to figure out how to scale it, what are the resources, the Ashtabula Port facility is ideally suited, assuming we could, at some point in time, take enough acreage to make it happen. But the interesting thing about offshore wind is that over 60% of the jobs and businesses are associated with other aspects than manufacturing. We have everything from medical and health, underwater robotics. Every year the foundations and cables need to be inspected. There's shipbuilding, there's operations and maintenance, biology, ice breaking, weather forecasting, engineering, operations. So there's a tremendous amount of doing as opposed to making. So the skill set required is quite large, and it's really much more than manufacturing. What I did is this is for one project in the UK. It gives you an idea of what are the man-hour requirements in all the different phases, from development and design, project management, procurement, transportation. You can read through there. As you can see, there's a lot of work associated with the doing. The current project we've been talking about is approximately 7 miles off of downtown Cleveland. It would be 5 to 7 wind turbines, approximately 4 megawatts apiece. The crib, which is over there in the center of the chart, is approximately 3.5 miles off. And that is a resource that I know in 1905 when they put it out there, they were thinking of us. And it's been our meteorological station. We have put up avian radar out there, ice sensing, all types of instruments to help us in the permitting process so that we can make sure we get it right. This is another view showing the 2 possibilities for tying into the substations. We have Cleveland Public Power and the Lakeshore plant that was in that second photo with the black smoke coming out. The grid that we show here is what Ohio Department of Natural Resources created. One of the things we came to find out very early is that Ohio, ODNR, Ohio Power Siting Board, are really at the forefront of understanding what it takes to get this industry moving forward. They took the entire lake in Ohio, divided it up into 1 square nautical mile squares, and then rated each area as to the suitability for offshore wind. Looking at fisheries information, view shed from the shore, electrical connections, shipping lanes, and then color-coded it, basically saying that if it's red, it's not that you can't get a permit, but it won't happen in your lifetime. And if it's green, dark green, the guidance is, why don't you start there, and then we will work on what the permitting requirements are. This gives you an idea of the entire lake. And as you can see, as we move from Cuyahoga to Ashtabula, through Lake and Ashtabula, that really shows you where the development will take place. Very little, if any, will occur in the western end of the lake, primarily due to the avian and fisheries, but also the fact that the prevailing wind is out of the southwest. So as it moves across the lake, the wind resource really becomes better the farther east you go. So if somebody was to look at where is the best place to locate in the lake, without knowing anything else, one would pick Lake and Ashtabula counties. Between the substations and the distance to getting offshore, being out of the shipping lanes, those are really the best areas. Just to give you a little idea of what a wind farm and what some of this looks like, basically this is showing a different type of foundation, but the other type is something you can basically pound into the ground, pound into the lake bed. We have this glacial till and bedrock underneath, shale. So pounding these in is not exactly the best way to do it. That's why we've looked at a gravity-based foundation, which basically sits on the bottom. You connect all the wind turbines with a collection system underground, much like an onshore wind system, except we bury the cable 2 meters under the lake bed, go to a substation, and then back to onshore. What's shown in this picture here is what's called a jack-up barge. It floats out, raises itself, and then constructs the turbine on site. This is a cable laying vessel, and that gives you an idea of the scale of this equipment that we're talking about. When we went to Norway, we visited the GE turbine, and we had 11 people on top, which is a lot of people. And of course, we don't tell GE Environmental Health and Safety that we had 11 people on top. There was room for 15 more. So it gives you an idea of the scale of these machines. This is another interesting way of doing it. The main picture there, somebody got the idea of let's put all these parts on a ship and then take the ship out and then build instead of doing it a piece at a time. This is a great idea except for one thing. Anybody who's a sailor or boater realizes that the taller it gets, the more it becomes susceptible to the waves and the weather. So while that's a really good idea, the farther out you go, the more impact weather and waves has. And you would think that would be obvious to all of us, but like most things, it becomes obvious after we've made a mistake. And the reason I bring that up is currently there's a project in the UK called Sheringham Shoal. And it's being put together by Statoil and Statkraft. Those are the two state companies out of Norway that decided that they're oil companies, very good. Statoil is about an $85 billion company, kind of a reasonable player to get into this. Their first offshore project, Sheringham Shoal, they decided to use a methodology like this. They needed to get 60 or so foundations in the water last summer. Well, they got 17. They did everything wrong. And so here's a very smart company, a lot of resources, a lot of smart people, and it was their first project. And the reason I bring that up is that this industry is still, even with all the investment in Europe and Asia, is still a very young industry. And there's a lot to be learned. There's a lot of opportunity. On the lower pictures, those are one is the substation on the lower left. The one in the center is showing you taking out a complete rotor that was in Sweden. And then the one on the right, lower right, is a 5 megawatt machine that was built on shore and then taken all the way out in one piece. So you can see there's all kinds of different methodologies, all kinds of ideas on how do we get this done, which means it's an opportunity for business and individuals to figure out how to do this and do it better. I'm going to show you a quick video and then, whoops, okay. Oh. Click on it. There we go. At the time this was filmed, this was the largest wind farm in the world, offshore wind farm. This is off the coast of Denmark. Those yellow pieces are what's known as transition pieces. They're about 200 tons. In this particular case, when you put the foundations into the lake bed, they need to be within a half a degree vertical, and because that's next to impossible, you put in the pile, and then you put in a transition piece that then compensates for any deviation in the vertical. That's what's known as a monopile. Those are approximately 600 tons. They get pounded into the seabed. Now realize those foundation pieces are approximately 5 meters in diameter, and they're being pounded into the ground by a 600-ton hammer. That's the transition piece. That's the grout that holds the transition piece in place. That's the substation going out. Some of you may have seen that in Modern Marvels. That's the jackup barge we were talking about. Currently, there's only one jackup barge on Lake Erie, and it's about half the size required for this process. That's the underground cable. It's about $1 million a mile for putting that cable in and the cost of the cable. Believe it or not, the cable ship is much like, aside from a lot of modern inventions, the cable ship looks a lot like the one that laid the first transatlantic cable in 1850s. You basically put on a big spool and then you pay it off into the water. Those are the blades. Currently, the offshore blades are about 60 meters in length. To give you an idea, MFG's largest blade to date is about 48 meters. So that just gives you a sense of scale of what's going on in the offshore industry. There's only 2 manufacturers in the world that currently make these blades. Those are the tower sections. Once this starts, unless there's any weather delays, it runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's Princess Amalia. Okay, and that's me on the turbine in Norway, just to prove that I was there. If you need to get a hold of us, there's all the contact information. And so at this point, I'd be happy to answer any and all questions from the audience.